Well, let's make sure we include this in the pod, in the little outtake section. Okay, so let's go again. Let's talk about. I'll talk about a few of the highline figures, and we can comment on them and see what our opinions are. So, total value in Q1, there was a 2% decline in the total value of transferred properties as opposed to Q4. Last year, sales volume Q1 and Q4 is a 10% decline. However, year on year, there is a 23% increase Q1 this year compared to last year. And in terms of value, so although we've got 2% decline quarter on quarter, a 29% increase in value year on year.
Yeah.
So what do you read into that in terms of how the market started?
I always think when it comes to sales side of things, especially the fact that transactions take typically 8 to 12 weeks to actually go through, like it's really, really difficult to make any sort of firm opinion on a quarter by quarter basis. For me, if I wanted to make an informed decision on something, I'd always look year on year. And I think the year on year figures pretty much back up what we're seeing, the fact that the market's still really, really busy. There's still a huge appetite to buy out here. And if anything, like a 2% decline quarter on quarter, it just shows that the market is hopefully stabilising a little bit, because I think that it's better for everybody.
So explain that a bit if you can. Why we're hopeful it's stabilising and why is it better?
It'll give more confidence, because when people, certainly like investors who are a lot more strategic, if they see like mad increases in terms like 25%, 30% and things like that, I think they think it's like very, very hot, cold. And if it's more volatile, you can be a little bit more, you're not as confident in terms of what might happen in the following quarter. So if you see like smaller incremental increases, it can give you a little bit more confidence in terms of what the longer term performance is going to be. It's a little bit more like whenever we talk about things like the UK market, the reason the UK market is a bit more predictable is because there's a lot of evidence there and it's a lot more mature. And I think that's what we're seeing in Dubai now. I think it's a maturing market. There's a reason for people to want to be here in terms of the city itself. It's probably the best place to be at the minute. And there's also all sorts of incentives why someone would want to buy a property here, the golden visa schemes and what have you. So I just think the market's really, really maturing compared to what was like 6 years ago.
Well, and also on the backdrop of what we have been talking about, what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years is the double digit percentage increases in terms of value, in terms of volume, even now year on year, we're talking about even quarter on quarter in terms of sales value. So do you think we are now seeing a little bit of stabilization then?
I think so, personally. I mean, you still see like, in terms of our private office, I think Lewis mentioned it on last week's podcast with Lindsay, we're doing like huge transactions in terms of value. So certainly as they skew the figures, Lindsay was saying as well, like, 5, 6 years ago, if you've seen transactions going through it, 60 million dirhams and things, that was like making huge times and stuff. Now there's transactions going through it like 250, 300, and they're pretty routine. So I think that really, really high end level of the markets. I think we were discussing just before, weren't we? You were saying like with the average sales price, it's 2.7 million dirhams, wasn't it?
Yeah. So 2.7 million. There's actually been an increase so year on year, there's been an increase in the sales transaction volume. There's actually been a decrease in the average sale price.
Yeah.
Which I'm going to link that into the rental data, which we'll come on to as well. So 9% decline in rental renewals in Q1 and a 19% decline in new rental contracts.
Yeah.
So seems to be a reducing level of activity in the rental market, which coupled with the fact that we see an increased level of activity in what we call in Dubai the lower end of the market.
Yeah.
Does tend to back up what we were saying last time in terms of people moving into home ownership.
Yeah, and what I was saying about the sales side of things, it's difficult to make or form opinions quarter on quarter by quarter. With the rental side of things, because it is a lot more fast paced, I think because this has been a trend which has started towards the end of last year, certainly followed us through the first quarter of this year, I think it's probably safe to make an assumption that there are people that are arriving to Dubai where they are buying quicker. They're looking to get on the ladder faster. And you look at some of the loft plan launches as well. Like last month, we had the Gaff Woods launch. A lot of the products, even though that is apartment, it's going to be a top class apartment community for somebody who's just arriving here and wanting to get on the ladder. Something like that, where it's a 1.4 million dirham one-bedroom property where it's on a pretty reasonable payment plan, that there is a lot more attainable for people to get on the ladder. And then hopefully if the market does keep increasing, they can benefit from it. And in the future, they sell that, they upsize because of the change in circumstances or whatever. That's a mature market. That's what happens in other marketplaces, which previously in Dubai, that wasn't really happening. So I think it's good signs all around, personally.
Agree. Well, good signs all around, but maybe not for landlords. What do you think? If we're saying the rental, just have a sip of your premium water there. If we're saying the rental market is value and volume is decreasing, what does that spell for landlords?
I think only, look, if more people are buying, then that means there's going to be less supply in the market, full stop. So these properties that people are purchasing, obviously they're owned by people to start with. So if there is less rental stock in the market, I don't necessarily think that rental prices are going to crash or anything like that, far from it. But the decline year on year in terms of transaction volume, that is, like we said in the last podcast, it's probably indicative of a move towards ownership. But the values haven't dropped by anywhere near the same amount. So
1%, so exactly. Negligible, really.
So the values, and I think there's been talk in the press about, do they think values in the rental market are going to come down? Well, if there's less of a supply, which there is at the minute, no, I don't think in the short term. But if there are more and more properties handing over, that's potentially when landlords could potentially look at it. And especially if they've got something in an older building, when you're renting something, you want it shiny, you want it new.
One thing that did happen in Q1 was the clampdown by the central bank in terms of buyers weren't able to finance the agent fee and the DLD transfer fee.
Yeah.
We were interested to see if that would affect the market and affordability, because obviously people need more cash upfront at the start of the transaction. Do you think that's impacted the market at all? Or?
I think it's too early to say. There was also a meeting in the US, wasn't there, from the Federal Reserve last month where they held interest rates. There's going to be potentially 2 further interest rate cuts towards the end of the year. If that happens, mortgage interest rates here normally follow suit. So I think more from an affordability standpoint, if people can get approved for loans at whether it be smaller monthly payments or higher values, that's what's going to have more of an effect on pricing. And we said it in the last podcast as well, we keep referring back to it, but a lot of the figures we're talking about, they're pretty similar to what we were discussing last time. A lot of people weren't aware that you could finance those fees. I think a lot of people, when they make the decision to buy, they've got it in their head that they've got the 4% transfer fee, they've got the 2% broker fee. And when they sit down and actually go through the pre-approval, I think it was always something that was put onto them by the mortgage advisor. Oh, do you know you can finance those fees? And it was always a nice to have, not a must have.
Yeah.
So I think it's too early to say whether or not it is going to have an impact. I personally don't think it's going to have a massive one. I think what will have a bigger impact on things will be if there are interest rate cuts towards the end of the year and it's more affordable for people to buy, there's only going to be an increased appetite and more buyers coming into the market. So I think that's probably the bigger thing that will affect things.
So the rate cuts, just to really spell it out clearly, basically means your monthly mortgage payment comes down.
Yeah, and your affordability goes up as well, because obviously when the banks are stress testing you to see if you can afford the monthly payments, they're going to be testing you on a higher percentage. So if the interest rate comes down, then the amount that you can actually borrow goes up. So it means you've got more buying power. So if you're looking for a 3-bed, you might be able to squeeze for a 4-bed and what have you. So it'll help people move in the market.
Good. Okay, let's have a look at some of the Allsop and Allsop A&A sales data. So we saw that Jumeirah Golf Estates and Albarari were in the top 5 of our top 5 performing areas.
Yeah.
So that tells us a little bit about the activity in the clientele that we're operating at. And just to, this pod isn't really to give a shout out to any team, but the Jumeirah Golf Estates team has got a 52% market share,
yeah,
which is incredible. So 1 in every 2 properties that sells in Jumeirah Golf Estates is with that team.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think as well, the price points now that we're seeing, that the transactions are going through are like, I remember speaking to Darren and Liam and the guys that really specialise in it, and they were saying there was a lot of properties around that 20 to 25 million mark that were just sticking and they weren't really moving last year. I think the majority of transactions the guys did last month were all 20 million plus, weren't there? So there's interest and there's an appetite to buy at that level of the market in GAG. And obviously Albarari, I think we had one of our record transactions, didn't we? 121 million dirhams that went through for. So it just shows you, the sorts of transactions that happen in those communities. They're breaking records every single month, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they certainly are. But again, I think it just paints a picture of the level of clientele that's still, because I'm sure this isn't exclusive to Allsop and Allsop this kind of trend. But the level of clientele that's still flooding into the city, it doesn't seem there's any kind of slowdown at the moment. Something else that was interesting, there was a 16% increase in viewings in Q1 this year compared to Q1 last year.
Yeah.
Coupled with, I think, our sales between 1 to 3 million rose significantly. And there's also a 27% increase in transactions between 5 and 10 million. So all of this together, it's just pointing at every level of the market is still thriving.
Yeah,
really.
no, it is. It is. And I don't think, in terms of the sales side of things, it's going to slow down anytime soon. Certainly, from a personal perspective, I'm looking to try and buy something else here as well as soon as I can afford to. I know there's lots of our friends that have purchased things, so there's confidence even within the people that are doing it every single day that it isn't going to slow down. There's money to be made. So what I would say, a bit of advice for anybody, if you're sitting on the fence thinking if it's a good time to buy or not, if the people in the industry are doing it, then that's normally a good sign for you. Well, I just went back home to the UK there last week, and I went into Newcastle City Centre once, and I know you've mentioned it time and time again, and people can see it for themselves, but like shops are all boarded up, and you know it's just, you know, just like the whole vibe of it. It's just like there's nothing happening, and then in total contrast, you come back here and the place is just buzzing. Like it's busy everywhere you go. Like it doesn't matter what time you go to the Dubai Mall, Marina Mall, whatever mall you go to, there's people in there spending money. The F&B's always busy. Like it's such a thriving place, and the real estate markets benefit from it as well. So I can't see it slowing down anytime soon. There's a reason why people want to be here. And like you said, the high net worth individuals, but even just people as well, like yourself and I, where we aren't high net worth individuals or anything like that. It's just the opportunities the city affords, like families and things like that. They want to be here. So yeah, I can't see it slowing down. Certainly, we've mentioned the letting side of things. That's something to potentially keep an eye on. I don't think initially it's going to be a dramatic decrease or anything like that, but if more supply comes into the market towards the end of the year, which is promised to, it might have an impact on things, but there's more and more people moving here and they need to live somewhere.
Well, and I think there's a story out a couple of days ago that they're confident that the population is going to rise to plus 4 million plus by the end of the year as well. So it sounds a bit, I was going to ask you, you kind of covered it already in terms of predictions for Q2, but really without putting words into your mouth, it sounds like more of the same.
Yeah, I think more of the same. I think the figures that we're seeing now, they're probably going to be exactly the same when it comes to Q2. We're probably going to see a really, really big increase year on year in terms of the quarter on quarter for 2025. Marginal gains or losses, but nothing really to shout about. And I think that's probably going to be the story for the rest of the year, with overall, towards the end of the year, I reckon high single digit to 10% increases in terms of prices. That's a healthy market.
I think so. I know it sounds a bit boring, and I would love to come on and have some kind of salacious headline that everyone can pick up on, say this is happening.
Just say the rental market's crashing.
Things are exploding. There's your cutout for the teaser.
Prices are crashing in the rental market.
But a boring market. It is boring to talk about in a sense. But it's good for everyone in Dubai. It's good because, like you say, investors have confidence, end users have confidence. There's confidence in people moving to the city. So more of the same isn't a bad thing for us.
Well, I was listening to Steve Bartlett, Diary of a CEO podcast, and he listened to the same podcast as what I listened to. Because I mentioned to you last time, a millionaire since the Labour government came in has left the UK every 45 minutes. So wherever I got that stat from, he's listened to the same podcast and you repeated on that one.
Maybe you listened to this one.
Imagine if he had. But what they were talking about there is like, you know, in the UK, like the capital gain side of things, like the tax you have to pay on your income as a landlord, you've got, do you know what I mean? Like there's that many taxes and things that there's no incentive for you whatsoever to actually try and make or any sort of gain there at all. When you look here, there's no capital gains on the properties that you purchase. The rental income is not taxable. It's just such a better place, in my opinion, to invest your money. So why wouldn't you want to buy if you could? I had the conversation with my wife there last week because we were thinking about, as I said, potentially buying something here or the UK. And they were the things I was saying to her, like, if I buy something back at home, you've got all the tax implications, the headaches and stuff like that. The rental side of things as well, it's not even as secure as it. Like, you're going to be getting your rent month to month, and if the economy's down with things, like, can the tenant pay, will they pay and stuff, and you've got all that headache of trying to get the money. Whereas here, it's normally 1 or 2 check payments. It's easy to manage. There's no capital gains if you do sell it. There's no gains that you pay on the rental income. It's a no-brainer for me.
So there you go. There's a message to every agent in the market. Dan Maloney is a hot buyer at the moment. He's got cash to burn.
I'm not, because I had a mortgage payment last week and I have zero affordability. So let's just wait towards the end of the year and I might have a small little pot together to get a studio somewhere.
Good. Well, that rounds...
I'm drinking fake water, for God's sake.
Fake water. It's because it's not Evian. Good. Well, hopefully you found that insightful. If you have any questions, let us know. If there's any bit of the data that you want us to dig deeper into, let us know. Let us know also. There might be something that you've picked up on that you want us to explain further. Hopefully you've liked it. Follow, subscribe, like in all the usual places, and we'll be back again soon.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Dan.